Welcome back to the studio. I have some of my favorite things around me today. I have some orchids. The orchids actually have some other little plants in them too. I think this is Anthurium, and I'll think of this in a second. I should know because I was a Florida certified nursing professional for many years. The other thing that I have around me are some applique and some new fabric. I don't know, I often see people online asking what their favorite part is or what their least favorite part is of quilting. A lot of times least favorite part is binding, let's face it. That's a particular fondness for that. It's like something only a mother could love, whoever invented binding. We all love the way it looks when it's done well, but doing it well is cumbersome, unpleasant. But one of my favorite parts of a project is all of the very beginning parts, the choosing a pattern, finding a really cool quilting pattern that you love, and then the search for the perfect fabric, being at the fabric store and feeling the fabric, getting distracted, buying more fabric. But also is Christmas and applique. I mean, these are a lot of my favorite things. So I'm going to be doing this Merry Christmas. This is called Good Tidings. It is a kit, basically, for a one-block wall hanging. Could be a beautiful pillow, or it also could be some type of art. This could be done on wood, vinyl, plastic, metal, glass. So there's a wide variety of things that you could do with this. I've seen people recycle old window panels with the glass still in it. This could be fused right on a window panel, and you have almost an instant Christmas decoration heirloom. What I'm going to be doing though is using it on fabric, which I know is very traditional, but I will tell you that this pattern, Good Tidings, was and remains to be one of our top selling items. It is so beautiful when it is finished, whether it is on a hard good product like wood or glass, or whether you have it in a quilted project. It is bright and cheerful and happy, and it's so easy to do. The whole process of this laser cut applique is peel, place, and press. It's very simple. The nice thing also about this particular kit, this one comes in either batik fabric or in a kind of a retro dot fabric. So you have two options as far as the fabric selection, and if you didn't want either of our fabric selection, this is also available as a paper add-on pattern, where you would just get a paper pattern and use your own fabric and your own quilting applique method. It's available as a SVG file, which stands for scalable vector graphics. That just means the pieces could be sized according to your desire. You would do that with either like a Brothers Scan and Cut or a Cameo Silhouette. It is not right now an embroidery pattern, so it's not something that you could download to your embroidery module. But you have all of those other options as far as doing it yourself, buying a kit, and the download for the Scan and Cut. I am going to be using the kit. There's nothing easier. You just get the little paper template out, the placement guide that's in there. You have your full sheet color guide on the front, helping you to see where the pieces go. And then it's just a matter of choosing your own background fabric and any other fabric that you might want to coordinate with it. A short while ago, I went to my local quilt shop, which is quite a ways away from me actually. It's hardly local. And I got a whole bunch of background fabrics for doing some of these applique projects. This particular one is a Riley Blake design pattern called Blossom by Christopher Thomas of the Tattooed Quilter. I don't know who that is, but I love this fabric. Not only do I like the fabric itself, I like the color of the little hint of green in the background. I would call this an old-fashioned shirting fabric. That's what it reminds me of from like the 1800s, what they used to make men's shirt out of. But I'm sure that's not what it was designed for. I'm going to use that as my applique background, and then I also found this red and green check that I want to use as the border. Now the funny thing about this, they blended the red and green, and visually speaking, when you blend red and green, you get brown. So I'm sure if you look at it, you'll see that some of these squares read as brown. Even this looks like almost a light brown. In fact, it's just red and green, very fine red and green woven fabric, so that the appearance is the blending of the red and green. Having said that, I still really loved it. And I'm going to tell you the other crazy thing that I think I'm going to do with this. I'm going to use the background fabric size as a reference, but I'm not going to cut it exactly. When I was looking at this fabric, I wanted to keep it, when I do it, I'm going to use this as the border. I wanted to keep this so that the check pattern lines up perfectly. And there's a skill no matter which way you do it. Now the obvious thing I could have done is used 4 cornerstones in the 4 corners of the border and eliminated any of the thought process for where these would intersect, because there would be no intersection. I would use either a red or green and just go ahead and use those cornerstones, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. That would be the easy thing. But I think what I want to do, and we'll see if I actually do it. I always say a lot of things. I'm a big talker. But what I want to do, I think, is to try and measure out what the closest size would be to what the finished applique is supposed to be. But then measure inside where these squares already are, and applique the entire white piece of background onto this border fabric, so that there is no need for sewing where the pieces meet, because it would just be one big piece of fabric in the background. And the only reason for doing that is to achieve harmony, so there is no crooked lines on the actual intersections where the fabric meets. Now sometimes it can be quite quirky to have a check or a stripe where it intentionally doesn't line up and nobody worries about it. But that's not the look I'm going for today on this. I really want harmony. And so I have enough of this border stripe to accommodate this project. I will just have to do some kind of an applique method, but I think I'm going to do hand applique. Just to do one rectangle on this, it shouldn't take me very long. I know it may seem counterproductive to do that on a quick project, but this is going to be so quick, I think I could applique this in one night, and so it would be fairly quick. And I probably will also, once I get it appliqued, cut away the background so that this doesn't bleed through the white, or I could use a woven fusible on the back of the background or something else to make sure that the check doesn't bleed through my background, because I want this to be as white as possible. So that's a lot of information for an easy project, but I want to let you know what it is that goes on in this crazy head of mine. Many people have been trying to figure that out for a lot longer than you have, my parents included. But I'm going to get upstairs first, and I'm going to iron this out, and I'm going to cut a larger than necessary representation of my background block, and then I can go ahead and get started on taking out the applique pieces and getting ready for this fusible project. So stay tuned while I get my wrinkles ironed out, which is a lot easier than ironing out troubles in life, let me tell you. So be right back. Well, that wasn't too long. I ran upstairs and I re-ironed both my background and my border fabric. And rather than using the exact measurements off of the background of the block, I used the print to use my measurements, and I've increased it a little bit so there's a little bit more float from the pattern to the border. That gives me a little extra room. Now I'm sure I haven't accounted for something. My life just would not be the same if I thought everything through and got it all 100% right. But I have measured for 3 rows of blocks of the plaid, 3 squares, all the way around the quilt. And I've just then used the space that's over the size as my center piece. So this is a little bit oversized, but I know once it's appliqued, it will give me 3 check blocks all the way around, and we'll just see how that goes. So anyway, that's my my background stuff. I'm going to go ahead and clean off some of my decorations here and get ready for the applique. I will get my light box out. This is a really light background, so I may or may not need it. And I'll get my iron ready, and then I like to sort out my pieces into like shapes. I'll probably also iron my background paper. I just like to get the creases out of it because I don't want that crease to translate into misplacing some of the pattern. I will say that I make plenty of mistakes, but I try to do things to prevent mistakes as much as I can. It doesn't mean that I'm going to end up with a perfect project, but for me, perfect is finished, not perfect as perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and switch, and we'll be right back again. You can see I've done a couple things in the interim. I have my paper pattern on the ironing surface face up, and I ironed that with the ink side up so that I could get the wrinkles out of it. I've also placed my background fabric over top of the paper so that there's a 3.5 inch border from the paper itself out on the sides, and from the top of the writing up and the top of the writing down. So when the piece is finished, it will have approximately the same amount of space all the way around it. In other words, I've centered the paper behind my background piece. I also measured my background piece to make sure I had it going the right direction because it's a little bit longer than it is wide. Visually, if you just looked at it, no matter which way you rotated, it looked like it would have been right, but I did measure that. Excuse me. I also have laid out my pieces from the pattern. I started with the lettering just to make sure I have all those right, and I separated all the pieces into like shapes or colors, which will make the placement a little bit easier. I also have my color cover sheet inside my sign holder, so I could use that as a reference if I get confused about which piece of fabric goes where. It also comes with the full instructions on how this process works, which is fairly simple, but for those who haven't done it before, the instructions are there. And I have my little label said packed by Vicky. I think Vicky's the only person I've ever seen that does these packaging, but everything seems to be perfectly in order. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this plastic bag off of the table just so it doesn't come in contact with the iron. Now I'm going to go ahead and move the camera even closer. Hopefully you'll be able to see down through the pattern. This is one of the things I've struggled with on the videos over the years. Some people have said they can see better without the light box. Some people don't want any overhead light in the room. Some people just want the light box in the dark. It doesn't seem that I have ever found a way to make everybody happy, but today I can see through the background fabric, so I hope you'll be able to see it also. What is important is that you'll be able to see yours when you're doing it, and so you use whatever method works best for you. Aside from the shadow of the camera, I think you will be able to see a faint outline of the drawing here, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the letters. Another thing that I might do is actually just put a couple pins in my background fabric just so that it doesn't wander as I'm working. Now these pieces, as I said, are all laser cut and pre-fused with Steam-A-Seam 2. The laser cutting gives us really precise edges on all of these pieces. This is considered a raw edge applique technique, so these are raw edges. But the laser seems to burnish those edges, so we keep really, really sharp edges on the design. The paper backing is easy to come off. Generally, I just bend it over somewhere in a corner, and I'm able to get a separation, just like that. And so it just becomes a process of putting these pieces in place. Now this is sticky enough to hold in position. It's also repositionable. So once you get it somewhere, if you find out you have an S upside down or in the wrong location, you can pick it up and move it as long as it hasn't been fused with the hot, steamy iron. So I'm just going to go about my merry way. I wonder if you could hear the train in the background as it blows its whistle. That's one of the things about my small town. We have freight trains that go through several times a day, and I have grown so used to the sound of that, even though there are certainly different types of their warning horn. The one that's going by now is one of my favorites. It's kind of low-key. Certainly would be loud enough for you to hear it if the train was approaching, but at a small distance it evokes a much different type of memory. There is also a new turbo horn that even at several blocks away would knock you out of bed at night. But I really only hear it when the windows are open in the winter. During the hot summer months, I have my air conditioning going. I try and stack these applique papers together because they can be quite a nuisance once they get floating around the studio. Sometimes they'll have the tiniest bit of residue left from the Steam-A-Seam 2 on the paper, and they will fall on the floor, and they're almost impossible to get a hold of if they're upside down, and they're like slightly sticking to the floor. On the S, you can see there's a circle here. That's always at the bottom portion. And once you get going, you'll see this goes very quickly. Now, every once in a while, they'll have one of two things happen. One is that during the manufacturing process of adding the Steam-A-Seam 2 to the back of the fabric, it didn't get fused long enough. And when you go to peel the paper off, what you'll have is the Steam-A-Seam 2 is sticking to the paper, not the fabric. And you can even see that Steam-A-Seam 2, it's shiny on the backing. When that happens, you just place your paper back over the applique, iron it for, well, that's going to depend on how long, how good your iron is and what setting you have it at, but you're going to iron it the same way you would from the front. Then let that piece cool down, and then you can go ahead and peel the paper off again. What would be the other thing? The other thing that might happen is the Steam-A-Seam is bonded so well with the paper and with the fabric that it's really hard to get the paper backing off. And in that case, what I like to do is I will take something like, I use these flower head pens because I can always tuck one next to the iron. But you could use the point of a scissors or a seam ripper, and you're just going to make a score in the back of the paper, and then when you bend the paper at that point, you'll see it gives you a place to peel up from. So that is what you do with those two situations. So now I'm going to start. I have all of my lettering in place, and I'm going to start putting these little curlicues. Now sometimes we have mirror imaged curlicues in the same set, but in this particular set they're all going in the same direction, so we don't have that issue to worry about. I'm going to place all of these first. Now, as long as the paper backing is on here, you could have just about any age group help you with this, sorting it out like puzzle pieces. You could either have very small children try and put like shapes together, or you could have them use the paper as a placement guide, just like a little puzzle, and have them help you put these pieces in place, just as an opportunity to spend time together. If they're a little bit older and a little bit more skilled, you could also have them peel the papers off and put them on, as I am here, because they can always be repositioned if you need to make an adjustment. If they're a little bit older yet and they're capable of safely handling an iron, then by all means you could have them do that as well. And what I really like about that process is that it builds an emotional connection to this project. So whether you're making it for them or if it's something that might be passed down to them, they have an emotional connection to that because they helped participate in the process of making it. Now I'm going to choose the next shape, which is this largest, what to me looks like a paisley. I'm sure it's a leaf. And once we go through and put all the largest pieces in, it makes it a little bit easier to see what we have left to do and what is next. So I just work kind of from the largest to the smallest. I'm always paying attention to the paper underneath of where the pieces are, but I'm also keeping in mind that if I make a small mistake, that I can always correct it by repositioning my components. Because I try and do this portion of the video in real time, I hope it does give you a sense of just how quickly these projects can go together. And I have a feeling those I think are correct. If you're unsure about one of the pieces, you could always look at the color cover sheet to make sure you're getting the right piece in the right place. Now, having said that, I'm going to tell you that if you were off on one of the pieces, once the paper's out of the background, no one's going to know. I don't see where this one goes. Right there we go. There is a companion to this piece, which was the evergreen, which is a Christmas tree that's very much done in the same fashion. And it also is one of our top sellers, and it also is available in both a Batik and retro dot. Hugely popular. And when you can finish a holiday project this quickly, it makes it well worthwhile, because with Christmas it could be up for a month or so, but you don't want to spend 6 months making something that's only going to be up for a little bit most of the time. But this will get more life out of it than the time you wrapped up in it. It also would make a really great gift. Looks like I'm stuck, doesn't it? Sometimes when you find out where it goes, you're wondering why it took you so long to figure that out. One of the nice things also about these types of patterns is that in general they are symmetrical. So once you figure out where one of the components go, you just find that part of the design as you go around the circle, and each one that you figure out makes the few that are remaining that much easier to place, because you've eliminated some of the possibilities. Too small. There we go. I think Christmas decorations have always been my favorite. I like really all different kinds. I've seen different movies and shows where they have really kind of minimalist modern Christmas decorations. I like that. I like over-the-top old-fashioned Christmas, where they have a lot of homemade ornaments and homemade decorations. and I like real simple decorations from being up in the mountains or pine cones. I just love how the decorations transform the whole house. I keep feeling like some of these. Yes, we have mirror images on these. You can see here on this particular shape, we have mirror images, and so some will be going to the left and some to the right. One of the things I've also kind of liked about having all of these samples in the studio is that, as I've said before, it's almost like quantum holidays, because you never know what day it is, because people don't necessarily watch these videos as they're put out. Some of you will watch them year after year at different times. So it could be Halloween or Christmas here in the studio at any given time. But also there's a happiness about all of these seasonal projects. And let's see, we're getting down. I'm going to have to look closer in this area where the red ribbon's going to go, because there's a little bit more going on and it's just a little bit harder to see the pattern pieces there. I'm going to put in some of the red berries. You do have to be a little careful with these, because the smaller the piece, it is a little bit harder to get the paper backing off. And I say that, I mean that it would be a little easier to damage the edges on these pieces than on some of the bigger pieces. So you just have to be a little bit gentler. And also, I'm all thumbs. And in fact, you can actually see I do this with my thumbs. But I think when you start putting the red berries in, that's when the design kind of pops. So let's see if I'm missing any berries. I have a little leaf here. Once you get to the end and you only have so many pieces left, it makes it a little bit easier. Now I know I'm missing some leaves over here, and I have 3 left. So at some point I may pull the pattern out, or try and look at this a little bit more carefully. We have that one, this one. I'm going to lightly pull that back and see where each one of these remaining pieces goes. You can see just the tip of it. And I try and keep a little bit of a space in between each of the components. That's already got one. Two of these leaves are completely covered with the ribbon, so I'm not going to put those in place. Now I just have to go ahead and put the ribbon pieces What other method you need to employ to be able to get these visually is what I would suggest you do. You can see that the background of the ribbon is the darker red, and that goes over it. I always try and put the darker pieces in the background first, having everything merge at the knot. Dropped one of my ribbons. So I'll put this background piece in. I can see where that one goes. Once I have that, I know where the top goes. Want to make sure we get that right over the edge. Now we can put our knot in place, and we have 2 leaves that were covered. And 1 red dot left over. So that's up to me now. I could look and see against the paper pattern when I pull it out if I can find out where I could put them. I could save these for another project because I do these all the time and I like extra pieces, or I could just place them wherever I see fit. So I'm going to go ahead, we've done this all in one take, so you saw how long this took. I'm going to pull the paper out, I'm going to throw away all my little backing pieces, and I'm going to look at the pattern side by side. I'm always doing these upside down so they'll be right side up for you, and sometimes something may not look right to me, but I can't really tell until I look at it back right side up. So I've realized that this part of the ribbon is incorrect, but this is what's great about the Steam Seam 2 being repositionable. I had these bows, the right on the left and the left on the right, but needless to say, it was incorrect. It just looked like a funny ribbon. So now the ribbon is correct. I have located where all three of these components were supposed to go, and where they were supposed to go was completely covered by the ribbon. So I'm not going to put them under there just to be hidden under a shape. It's just going to add bulk that I don't need. So I also looked to see if there was any place I wanted to add an extra berry or an extra leaf, and there really isn't. I like it clean and simple the way it is. So as I said, I'm going to take these three pieces and just put them in a Ziploc bag and save them for any one of the other projects that I do to see if I might need a component like that. I've found these extra pieces like that to be useful in the past. So now the only thing that's left is for me to get my Teflon pressing sheet out and going ahead and starting the pressing process. As you can see, this is a very quick project. I have my pieces correct in place. I've looked at it from the front and the back to make sure I'm happy with the placement, and I'm going to go ahead and start the pressing. Steam Seam 2 requires some kind of a steam component during the fusing process. So you can't just use a dry iron. I don't like to put water in my iron, so what I always do is keep an empty spray bottle, fill it with water, and I like these spray bottles that have that continuous mist on it. But I'm going to go ahead and mist the top of the applique shapes, and then I'm going to put the Teflon pressing sheet over top of it, and this water will trap inside the applique and Teflon pressing sheet, and that's going to give me my steam component. This one's acting a little bit better for me. So I'm going to go ahead and mist my fabric, which will create my steam, and I'm going to go ahead and lay my Teflon pressing sheet over top, and then I'm going to put my iron on and let the iron do its work. The thing that I will tell you is, people always ask, how long do you fuse? Well, there really is no one answer to that. You're going to have to test. Sometimes the ambient temperature in the room will affect how long you have to fuse it. The quality of your iron, the weight of your iron, what the temperature setting is that you have on your iron. These are all factors that will go into play as far as how long it takes to fuse. Also, you have to take into account how many layers of material are we fusing through. In this case, I'm using a Teflon pressing sheet, so the heat will have to transfer through that first before it even gets to the applique. Where some of these pieces are together, like the knot for the bow, and then the pieces of the bow, and then the parts of the leaf underneath, and then the background, you're talking about several layers of fabric and Steam Seam 2. That heat has to have time to transfer through the pressing sheet and each layer of the fabric and to the background. So you will always hear me say that we fuse from the front, and then we flip it over and fuse it again from the back to make sure that it is permanently fused properly. If this is fused properly, This is permanent. It requires no stitching of any kind on top of it and can withstand going through the washer and the dryer. At Urban Elements, we never top stitch any of our samples. It is tedious for us, and it requires a very specific skill set to do it properly, one that I don't obtain, and we just like the cleaner look of plain quilting. Now, I like a traditional quilting thread, white or colored, and I don't mind it going over my applique shapes. I know Patricia really loves the clear monopoly from Superior, either clear or smoke, depending on what applique she's quilting over. So it really all depends on you. What it is your favorite. You could also top stitch if that is something that you enjoy doing. It's certainly not something I enjoy. I have done a shirt that way when I went to one of the quilt shows. I did one of the butterflies on the back of the shirt, and I top stitched over it. It is doable. It's just not something that I personally enjoy. Another reason that I use the Teflon pressing sheet, actually there are several. The Teflon pressing sheet prevents adhesive from the Steam and Seam 2 from seeping out around the edges of the applique and getting onto the sole plate of the iron. So using this technique, I do not have to clean my iron. It also protects the edges of the applique. In the past, I have been lazy. Instead of picking up the iron and moving it over to the next location, I have just pushed the iron from side to side, which you're not supposed to do with fusible. I caught the edge of the applique shape with the edge of the iron and I crinkled it up, but now it's hidden under the iron, so I fused it in place, crinkled. Well, you can imagine my frustration when I lifted the iron up and saw the mess I made. So the Teflon pressing sheet allows my nature to not inflict damage on the project. If I slide the iron back and forth ill-advisedly, I'm not catching the edges of the applique. Another thing it does is protect the background fabric, just to make sure that you're not scorching. If you hold the iron too long, it gives you a window of insurance and prevents any damage or transfer of gunk from the iron onto the background. So, because I'm always talking, I never am counting in my head, and I don't know how long I've been doing this. So, I will lift up the Teflon pressing sheet and give it a look and a little bit of a touch to see if it's damp. But as I said, I'm going to turn this piece over and I'm going to fuse it again from the back. And again, I'm going to reintroduce some steam in the form of mist. Some of you may ask yourself, I wonder why that crazy guy doesn't just put water in the iron. That's what we do. And the reason I don't do that is because I've been quilting for a long time, and I've never once found an iron that didn't start leaking at some point. But an iron simply cannot leak if you don't put water in it. It's implausible. So I've learned through the purchase of many expensive irons that ultimately always get knocked off an ironing board at some point, and a seal breaks or is damaged. I've learned to not put water in the iron. That way I don't get sputters from my iron. It sputters some rusty, dirty spit mark on a nice pristine background. and I can apply the mist exactly where I need it. So that is why crazy old guy does that. By using the spray bottle on the back, you can really see where the applique shapes are because they really darken with the iron. And then when the iron is dried that really well, you know that you fused it really good with the steam, but also you know that it is completely ironed and fused. One of the benchmark tests for whether or not something is fused properly is when you get to the quilting or if you do top stitch. If you are getting a lot of gumming on the needle of whatever type of sewing you're doing through fusible, that's an indication that you haven't fused long enough. You haven't fused hot enough or with enough steam. Because once this fusible material is bonded properly, there isn't any excess gumming that should be coming up on the needle, because we're activating all of it and we're using all of it. You can't overfuse something. You're not going to make the fusible evaporate by doing it too long. You would burn or scorch the fabric long before you could ever wear out the bonding agent. And I'm going to make sure I get this area right here really done well, because that's where all the layers of the ribbon were. And in this particular design, that is about the only place where we had a lot of overlap. So now I'm just down to my Merry Christmas. I can still see it's a little damp. And just like that, we have our finished block. Okay, so I have all of this part of it done. The only part that I have left really is to attach the border. So I'm going to try and do that portion tonight, and then I'll do a little bit of a closing showing that in place, and then we won't see this again until it makes its way to the lineup of getting quilted. I have to say, just this far, really in love with it. This really was an inspired design. It is bright and cheerful, has all of the components of what I think about when I think about Christmas. It's just happiness, and it's pure and clean and crisp. So I really like this, and I really think I'm going to love it on that green and red plaid background for the border. Have no idea how it will be quilted yet. But I will say that I'm thinking about getting some more of that red and green, because I'm thinking about doing at least a couple projects in the same way and then maybe quilting them differently. But I'm going to go ahead and just close this lightly now and hope that I do a proper closing tomorrow. If you have any comments about this quilt, I would love to see it. Or if you are one of the thousands of people who've made one of these projects, we'd love to see pictures of yours too in the comments. So I'm just going to do a light closing. Hopefully we'll be back in a little bit and show you the whole thing finished with border. So hopefully we'll see you very soon. Well, it took me 2 nights, but I did get it finished. Now what you're going to be seeing here is a little bit more fabric on the border than what will be left. There's only going to be 3 rows, 3 squares wide on the top, sides, and bottom. There's a white line here. That's all going to be, I'm going to quilt it, but then I'm going to trim it. I want to trim it so that when the binding's on it, it's right to that edge. But I'm sure there's a way to have pieced this in that square, but piecing in that way would not be my forte. And I have to say that I really love looking at it. I don't know why I get such a private joy out of seeing my applique work, but that's why I got into promoting Patricia's applique elements from the beginning, because I love applique so much. And hand applique takes so long. Something like this would have taken several months to do by hand, but with the fusible applique it goes so quickly. But I do privately get a great joy personally out of seeing my hand applique on this as well. I know that when this is quilted, probably nobody will notice. The eye is naturally drawn to the center, the beautiful part. Nobody will notice this, especially if I quilt this in the way that I think I am going to. So I will know it's there, and it will bring me great joy to see it. But I just wonder, are there things that you really love about a specific type of your quilting? It could be sharp points, your ironing, your binding technique, your fabric selection. I mean, there's a lot of parts about quilting that are very unique and very special to the person creating it. I just personally get more joy, a secret joy, out of seeing my applique work. Even if other people don't notice it, that's something that brings me joy like no other part of the quilt. A close second would be fabric selection, but I'd be curious to know what yours is, if you have one. So this top is finished. This will be my closing for this, and I'm hoping in the next couple of days to go ahead and get this quilted for a future video. But I'm really happy with it. I love the way that it looks. I'm really happy with how quick this came finished. Between the raw edge and the single day for this, 2 days for that, but for 3 days for a project that will get a lot of life in my house, I think this is amazing. As you can see, my table's already set up for the next video though. But thanks for stopping by the studio today while I went through this holiday project. You've heard me say it 100 times, I love Christmas, I love red, green, gold. Those are my favorite 3 color combinations, that antique Christmas. This red, green, blue is stunning also. It's very crisp. So this was a happy day from beginning to end. It's been a happy week because I was able to get a lot done and because the temperature dropped a little bit. So thanks for stopping by the studio. Thanks for spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would love to hear what your favorite part of your quilting is, whatever that is. And I look forward to seeing you here in the studio again next time.